Hi class, in this video I want to talk about typography. I think your reading does a really good job of explaining typography, but I think it's helpful to look at some examples. So I've put together a video that's going to follow this one in which I just walk you through using type. So you can see my thought process as I build something with type. I think it's really helpful to sort of see how I think about type, what kind of decisions I make. So I want you to watch that after this short video and keep in mind as I'm designing the kinds of decisions I'm confronting. What I'm doing. First, I sort of figure out the hierarchy. What's most important for the page? Then I sort of figure out what typefaces I want to use. What's the display type? What's the body copy? So pay close attention to the decision points that I go through in that video. But before you watch that, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about typography. So I want to talk about some of the elements of type that you read about. And again, I'm not going to go over in great detail what you read. I just want to show some examples here. So hierarchy, you guys are familiar with hierarchy. You've studied it during the design principles section of the class. Type follows hierarchy as well. With typography, you want to decide what type on the page is the largest and most important, and you want to order the type from most important and largest to least important and typically smallest. So you can't have everything on the page the same size of type. I always say if everything is big, nothing is big. If all the type is really big, then I don't know what I'm supposed to read as a viewer. You have to make decisions about what is supposed to be read and its order of importance. So in this example, you can see that I've determined the size and the order of importance. The name of the band being presented in this design is the largest because I want the name recognition. So it's first at the top and it's largest. Now it doesn't have to be at the top. Typically things that are at the top do draw our attention, but this is so large it could be at the bottom as well. But I put it at the top because I didn't want to bump into the character on the right. I would be cutting his foot off with that type. And then I've decided an order of importance. So the name of the band is first, and then the information about the new album and the website where you can get it is second. That's very important. I want people to remember that. And third is a little quote that's kind of funny that tells you a little bit about this band. That's least important because I don't really care if people remember the wording of the quote, but I want them to remember the band, the spelling of the band's name, and that they can buy a new album at this website. The quote is interesting, but if they don't read the quote, I don't really care. If they're looking at this and they only have 10 seconds, I wanted to show them what to look at by giving them the size. The size tells you what to look at. Foxy Shazam, Church of Rock and Roll, out now. FoxyShazam.com. Oh, I ran out of 10 seconds, but I missed the third thing. That's okay. So the less important stuff is going to be smaller. You also want to differentiate between what we call display type and body copy, and this is discussed in your reading and also in the handout. The display type is any type that is large and attention-grabbing that just includes a few words. Body copy is type that is meant to be readable, legible. Type that includes full sentences. Type that is explanatory in nature. That's what we consider your body copy. So in this example, the quote is body copy. It's full sentences. There's a lot of it. It's in a paragraph. Everything else is display type. The name of the band, the information about the website, those aren't sentences. They're just big pieces of info I want people to get. So I'm going to decide what needs to be in display type and what needs to be body copy. So before I even designed this, I knew that the quote would be body copy and everything else would be display type. Now you typically want to choose one typeface for your display type and one typeface for your body copy, and you're going to stick with it. And in fact, I'm going to put on this page no more than three typefaces per design. So in this design, I have two typefaces, Ziggurat and some sans serif. I forget exactly what it is. I don't want to have more than that. So 3 typefaces per design. 2, if you can do it, is great. 1 for the display type, 1 for the body copy. But if you want to bring in a third, you can do that. The example of the dinosaur this week, the Facebook cover photo example has, no, that actually only has 2 typefaces, so it's good. It has Avenir and then this typeface called Sail. So, but what you can do if you want to have 3 typefaces is the third typeface would be some other kind of display type. So maybe all your titles would be one type, and then all your other display type would be another typeface, and your body copy would be another. So just no more than 3 typefaces per design. Try to keep it to 2 if you can. Texture. You want your design to have what we call typographic texture, and this means you're going to use a variety of what is called weight and width. We could refer to these as type styles. So weight is how heavy the typeface is. Is it bold? Is it italic? Is it regular? Width would be whether the typeface is condensed or regular. Condensed typefaces, all the letters are squished together a lot more. And together we call these styles. So a typeface that is bold, condensed would be a style. You want to have a variety of weight and width. And when you make variety of weight and width, it still counts as only using one typeface. So in this example, I have ziggurat all caps across the top, ziggurat across the bottom because these are my display types, but I'm differentiating them and giving variety or texture by presenting them in different ways. The title is ziggurat, but it's all caps. The information at the bottom is ziggurat, but one line is italics and the other line is regular lowercase. So I'm creating this texture. If I had made all of the display type all caps regular ziggurat, I wouldn't have the variety that I need to make this interesting. So one thing I see a lot with people who are learning to design is they just choose a lot of typefaces. They put 5 or 6 typefaces on a design. And what they're going for is that variety. But you don't need to put different typefaces to create variety. You just need typefaces that have different weights and width to create variety. So in this design, I actually have a bunch of different type styles. The title is one, the Church of Rock and Roll is one, the website is one, the body copy is another, but I still only have 2 typefaces. So I'm using the variety of weights and widths, so italics, all caps, bold, to create the texture instead of using a lot of different typefaces. So when you're selecting typefaces in Photoshop, I highly suggest that if you come across a typeface like this one here that has no styles, Bernard MT condensed, it only has regular, try to avoid using it because you can't really get variety with that. You can't use the italics or the bold to create variety. On the right, we see one of my favorite typefaces, Avenir, and look at all the different styles it has. Light, light oblique, book, Roman, book oblique. There's a bunch of different styles here that I can use to create variety in my design. And so I would be more likely to be successful in designing a textured type element to a design with Avenir than I am with Bernard because I don't really have choices with Bernard. So if you are in Photoshop and you like a typeface but you look at it and it looks like Bernard, it has no style options, maybe you could use it, maybe for body copy it would be good, but you probably don't want to use it for display type. You also want to have balance, and you guys know what balance is. You've studied balance in this class. Balance is equal visual weight on both sides of the page. You want to make sure that your type fits into that. So in this example, I have way more type on the left side, but it's balanced out by more picture on the right side. So our eye goes to the type, but it also goes to the human figure. The weight of the singer in the chair is the same as the weight of the type on the left. Those things are equal in size, and so we have balance. You also want to be careful to align type. So in this example, everything is flush left. The headline, the body copy, and the display type at the bottom all line up across the left of the page. I could have them all line up across the right of the page, or I could have them all centered. Those are all valid, but they need to be lined up in some way. I wouldn't, for example, want to line up Foxy Shazam, Church of Rock and Roll in the website left, and then have the quote just randomly floating somewhere else in the page, not lined up with anything. Everything needs to be lined either to the left, to the right, or through the center. And you can switch back and forth. I mean, if you had everything lined up here, maybe this I could have lined up to the right, but I would actually want it to line up with the edge of this headline here. I want to talk about spacing or leading. Leading is the space between lines, and I really want to bring this up because Photoshop is terrible at leading. It doesn't do a good job. Photoshop is set to do create auto leading, or it automatically guesses the appropriate space between lines, but it does a bad job. And I always joke that I think it does this so that people know who's a real designer and who's not, who has design training and who doesn't. Because people without design training typically don't change the leading, and Photoshop makes the leading look bad. So one thing you can do to make your designs look professional is to change the leading. Whether you're using Photoshop or InDesign or anything, be really clear about, or be really consistent with checking the leading on everything. So in this example on the right, we need kerning, tracking, and leading. Those lines are too far apart. Remember from the Gestalt theory portion of the class that our brain interprets things that are close together as belonging together. Since these two lines are far apart, our brain interprets them as not being part of the same sentence. And that's a problem because they are. The leading is what we call too loose. But then in the next set, they're too close, tracking and leading, to make that G is touching that E, and it gives us a feeling of condensedness and claustrophobia. It's hard to read because the letters are bumping into each other. That leading is too tight. At the bottom, it's good to make our typography perfect. The amount of spacing between those two lines of type is great. And a general rule for leading is that the space between lines should be 1 to 2 points larger than the type. So if this typeface on the right is 36 points, a correct leading would be 37 or 38. Now I will tell you, some typefaces are weird. Some typefaces you do the leading that way and it doesn't quite work, and then you have to eyeball it. But for the most part, this is going to work. And I'm going to have a video later in this lesson that will show you how to change these things in Photoshop. Legibility. So some typeface is what we call more legible than other typefaces. Legibility is how easily a typeface can be read. You'll remember from the Gestalt law portion of the class that our brain does prototype recognition. Our brain recognizes an S because an S has certain features. It curves in a certain way. We know what an I is because it's a stick with a dot. Whenever we see a stick with a dot in a context of being type, we know it's an I. The more you get away from those prototypes, the harder your type is to read. So here in this script example, the S is kind of like a cursive S, but it's a little bit off and it makes that S hard to read. If we look at the black letter, the B has extra elements to it. It's not quite like the prototype, and that makes the B a little harder to read. That novelty typeface is just hideous. It's really screwing with the forms of the letters. It's not very easy to read. So you need to be aware of legibility. And the biggest thing to remember is that legibility goes down typically as you go further down this list on the right. Serif and sans serif are pretty equal. Easy to read, great for body copy. Square serif starts to get a little harder to read because the slabs mess up the prototype matching. Script can get harder. Some scripts are easier than others to read, but they can get harder again because they go a little bit outside the prototype sometimes. Black letters difficult to read because of the addition of elements to the letters makes it hard to prototype match. Novelty typefaces, there's a whole slew of them. Some are easier to read than others, but typically they add a lot to the letters and make it difficult for your brain to do prototype matching. Expression, I'm not going to go over this too much because I think your reading does a great job of looking at expression, but just keep in mind that typefaces have personality. I really what I want to go over here is that you don't have to go overboard with the personality. This little piece here, yay, exclamation point, it kind of seems happy, but it's not like it's got smiley faces in it. It doesn't have little curly cues. It doesn't have little flowers stuck on it, but it does seem excited. What about it seems excited? Well, it's very subtle. It's in the way the A curls around and has a cute little dot on the end. It's in the way the Y is not quite straight. It has a little motion to it and it's got the cute little dots on the end. It's in the way the exclamation point looks like a person jumping up in the air, having a lot of velocity. It looks like a motion line. It's cute, it looks exciting, but not because it has a bunch of cute stuff on it. It's very, very subtle. It's just little things like the curliness of the A, the little tail of the A, the little serif that sticks off there is really cute. It's like a little tiny baby curve. It says yay. It has that expression without going overboard. Not so yay has very little personality. Doesn't look like a very exciting typeface. There's not much to it. It's the same width of letters. It doesn't have skinny parts and fat parts like yay does. It's just standard thickness throughout. It's a little bit stretched out. It's just boring. It doesn't have a lot going on. It doesn't have the cute little flourishes that yay does, so it doesn't come across as being exciting. So you want to make sure that you match the expression to what it is you're trying to express. So if you're working with the university department, do you want to express seriousness? Do you want to express mostly seriousness with a little bit of fun? Do you want to express all fun? Your typeface has to reflect that. How to design with type, I'm going to cover this in the next 2 videos. The first is just an example of me designing with type so you can see my thought process, and the one after that is a little instruction on how to design with type in Photoshop, so specifically how to use the Photoshop tools.